I'm in Los Angeles, California with,
Susan Trachman.
and Susan's got MS.
Yes, I have MS. I was diagnosed when I was 27 and have had it for about 32 years. And I started out with a relapsing remitting case, and little by little it's progressed into kind of a secondary progressive case.
So we met through the art world, and you do artwork with your old medical supplies. So why don't you talk about how you, well, first, why you use old medical supplies, because to a lot of people they would just see IVs and tubes and sort of not see any beauty in them, and you as a patient are kept alive by them and you make art by them. So why don't you talk about that?
Because I was kept alive by him, and I chose to make art with him. And I, over time, started saving the bottles. I saved my MRIs, other medical supplies, knowing at some point I was going to create some art. And prior to creating the art, I did I was an interior designer. And once I stopped really working, I really needed a creative outlet. And so I knew at some point I'd take these supplies and I'd turn them into something beautiful or interesting. And there was also a piece of recycling.
So when you're doing interior design, you're taking other people's work. You know, you're designing a house. It's not like it's not art, but something hit and all of a sudden you're making art to tell your own story. So what sort of kicked that into gear?
What kicked it into gear was I was, at different times I was kind of losing control of different parts of my body. And I found creating the art was a way that I could regain control. And my first piece, I used my bottles and I selected a canvas which was, it had certain parameters, and the bottles were certain sizes, and I had to not only create a pattern with them, but I had to figure out, using logic, how to fit everything in so it all worked. And it took me a long time, but it was both challenging and rewarding. And it was a creative outlet for me.
So when you talked to the med students, you talked about how making these patterns gives you control, and we talked about the fact that there's sort of a chaos to your life now. So why don't you talk about how thinking about patterns, taking these art supplies, making them into something, sort of gets you through the chaos, and also maybe talk about the difference between just not feeling well and chaos.
Making these patterns and putting these things together takes my mind away from the chaos. And so so I used art to kind of shift my focus. And when the chaos hits, I also used art to express that. One of my pieces is actually I named it Chaos because I took resin, I created these resin pieces, and I threw the bottles into the pieces randomly. And wherever they landed, they landed. It didn't matter. But that was the chaos that I was feeling.
So So how does MS add chaos to your life?
The unpredictability. Am I going to wake up tomorrow feeling good, and have more strength, or am I going to be feeling like I have less energy? How do I monitor my tank, my energy tank?
So let's talk about the medical supplies. So medical supplies to me are sort of an interesting object to use, and I know a few other artists that do, because they've got dual purpose. They're sent to you to save your life, and then you're making artwork out of this life-saving. Like, they have their own story, but then you're telling your story with them.
It tells the story of my progression, and I think it also tells the story that other people with MS can relate to.
So let's talk about that. When you had your show at UCLA, you brought in an MS support group, and so how was their reaction to the work? Because your MS is sort of like my illness. Everyone's got different symptoms. Everyone's at a different point, but everybody could probably relate. I assume most everyone's taking the same medicines. So they're seeing things that are involved in their life and treatment up on the wall as art.
I think in some ways it made their dealings with their supplies and things less medical by seeing it turned into art. And one of the women was talking about the brain scan and was saying that, you go into your doctor's office, you look at these black and white images, they point to the plaque on the image. Plaque is like one small piece, but there's so much more there. And I chose to take it beyond the plaque and colorize the images. And she felt like there's, we have so much more inside of our brains. We have beauty.
So part of that show, you also interacted with the med students.
That was another bonus for me, getting an opportunity to speak with them, hear what they had to say. One of the medical students commented on the fact that she could read book after book after book and memorize information, but she could never get the kind of information she got from a patient, hearing me talk about my illness and how it relates.
Art is such a good way for medical students to get into their patients' thoughts. I mean, it might seem rude to walk up to an MS patient and go, "So your hands are shaking," and I guess that's kind of messed up. But when they talk to you, they can say, "So because your hands are shaking, you're creating all this beautiful art." There's a whole positive spin you can put in on it.
Yes.
I mean, that's why I love bringing artists and talking to artists, because we give other people the opportunity to ask us questions in a more comfortable way, I think.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And
we will be showing some more of Susan's work at USC later in the year, although it might be virtual, it might be real. It all depends on the vaccine. So thank you for talking with me.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me speak.